So, hello, Mack Gordon, coming at us from Vancouver, British Columbia, as Nardwar would say.
The pride of British Columbia, Nardwar.
And Zach Romano. Hey.
Hey, coming at you from Brooklyn.
So first, Mack has some cool new stuff he's working on that we're excited to learn more about. Why don't the two of you tell us how you know each other?
Yeah,
Sure,
so
yeah.
there's a longish story here. It's not that long actually. We met at a bar in Vancouver maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Mac and one of his buddies talking about like Thomas Pynchon or something, and I just couldn't not chime in.
Yeah, he was sitting next to us at 33 Acres in Vancouver, and it's like a brewery. And he started chatting with us, and we started chatting with him. We found out he was in town just with work and had never been to Vancouver before. And my friend John and I were like, well, do you want us to show you around Vancouver? So we took him to a couple of different bars, and we sort of had a real nice time with him.
Yeah, it was a great night. It was a great night. And then 5 years and several hangouts across the continent later, Mac is a friend of the pod.
Totally.
Yeah. Beautiful story of humanity and friendship.
Yeah.
It's been good connecting with your friends too, meeting people like Tom, and then Ross Burlingham too is like actually kind of one of our sound designers for War of the Worlds, which I'm here to even talk about. So it's been fortuitous connections all across the board.
Yeah, for sure. Like a real web of friendship has kind of sprung out of that one meeting. It is a real story of love and friendship. And speaking of stories of love and friendship, Mac has a production of A War of the Worlds that he's going to be putting on Love and Friendship Indeed. So can you just give us the basic breakdown of what this is, how I guess we can get into how you're putting it together later, but just what it is, kind of what you did to get it to what it is, and how people can hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a friend of mine and I, my co-producer with a company called Theater in the Dark, last year we put on our inaugural production, which was a show called 3 Stories Up. We did it live and in person, and it was completely in a pitch black room. So there was lots of descriptive language to really ignite the audience's imaginations. And then obviously there was also the dimension of space that we had to play with there too. So it was sort of similar to a radio play, except it was happening live all around you. Once the pandemic hit, we kind of saw an opportunity to take this adaptation of War of the Worlds that we were putting together, War of the Worlds, and pivot over to the virtual in a way that could be a little bit more interesting than maybe some of the other virtual productions that were happening that had visual elements. Because we had no visual element, we were able to lean more into the sound design part of it and lean a little bit more into the descriptive language, which was what we were kind of working with already. So we actually did a test run of 3 Stories Up in May through Zoom. We did it live. We had all of our sound options in Zoom optimized, and it ended up sounding pretty good. For this production, we have a composer. We have Ross, as I said before, doing sound design as well. We have 6 different performers who are joining us live from Vancouver, Chicago, and New Orleans. And it happens 6 nights a week live at 8 o'clock Central, so 9 o'clock Eastern. And we'll tune in from our studios, which is what I'm in right now, into your living room at that time each night from Tuesday until Sunday.
Awesome. So since we're not going to be able to see you while it's going on, do you want to give us a little look around your area where you're going to be performing from?
Sure. Yeah. So our studios are all a little bit kind of DIY because they're all in home for this kind of COVID proof production. I'll just
Uh-huh.
pick up my laptop and try not to let I have so many devices that I have
I
to use.
see. I see now that you are wearing a shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a open question before.
Not just a
Super
camel.
important.
So as you can see, I've kind of put together a lot of this insulation in this little, the front door closet of my apartment. And then I have a kind of
Shelving
a
unit.
shelf. Yeah, a shelving unit. So usually I put my laptop on this shelf so that you can't hear the fan running. I put my microphone on this shelf up here.
Very
Which you can see
smart.
it kind of goes all the way up. And then I have a little step stool that I step on because it's a little too high so that I can reach the microphone and get into some really intimate moments, because there's the play kind of jumps between the narration, which really helps us get into that descriptive world, and live action. So when I'm in the narration zone, I'm like, you never would have guessed in the first years of the 21st century. And then when I'm in a scene, it's a little bit more back here like this.
Got it.
Interesting. So, how do you prepare for something like this? You're an actor. I'm sure you're used to performing in theaters, but you do voiceover work as well. But this sounds like something a little bit different than that. How do you get prepared to deliver this performance?
Yeah, so for this show, we have a full rehearsal schedule. So
Oh,
I think
shit.
that's one thing that really sets us apart from a lot of the other virtual shows. A lot of it is kind of staged readings that are happening right now. And what happens in a staged reading is lots of times you don't necessarily have the most optimized choices. The cues might be a little slow. People don't necessarily understand the story as fully as maybe they need to if they're acting. So because we have the benefit of 3 weeks of rehearsal and a week of tech, it means that we can really make sure that the show is professional. It's like going to see something at Steppenwolf. It's like going to see something on Broadway, or probably more like off Broadway because it is a little bit more experimental.
Yeah, totally.
And because we don't have to worry about the visual element of sets, costumes, that sort of stuff, we can really focus in on the story. So right now we just finished our first week of rehearsal. We've done 4 runs, and Corey Bradbury, who is the director of the show and my co-writer, we've kind of gone back to the script and workshopped it a little bit as we put the finishing touches on. Next week, we start to go through the script a little bit more piece by piece, stopping and starting. We'll start to incorporate some of Ben Zucker and Ross Burlingham's sound design so that by the time we get into tech, hopefully it's just a lot of polishing that we're getting to at that point.
Cool. So you were in kind of a uniquely good position to put together audio dramas when the pandemic hit. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about what Theater in the Dark was before the pandemic and how that's kind of like translated into these Zoom dramas?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first show that I did in the dark was in 2016. And that was really for us, pioneering kind of how it works, what it's like for an audience to sit through 80 minutes in the pitch black with no intermission, with people moving around them. We've had to really adapt to make sure that we can promise the audience that they're going to be safe, that we're going to take care of them, that we're professionals, that everything is going to be all right. Because people get a little bit claustrophobic in that dark room. So that show ended up going really well. And I moved down to Chicago in 2018. I met Corey going to Second City, and we just sort of hit it off and ended up being very complimentary towards each other in a producing sense. So we put on 3 stories up last Halloween, and it was a big hit in Chicago. We sold out a lot of shows. And the hardest thing in that was really light locking the room. And then as performers, getting used to also performing in a pitch black space where we have to move quickly from, stage left all the way over to stage right, playing a different character so that you really paint a picture in the audience's mind that they are in a fully realized setting. That was set in Vancouver. It was like a Vancouver neo-noir. So it was the kind of gritty underbelly. And we wanted to, you know, have scenes that took place at the Seabus port. We wanted scenes that take place in like the old dive bars of the Ivanhoe down on like Main Street and Carroll, you know, those kind of grittier elements of Vancouver. Pivoting, once the pandemic happened, we really were just like, oh, we have an opportunity where everyone else is canceling their theater seasons to actually announce a theater season. And that might be something that can really set us apart so long as we really hit the ground running. We were lucky because we were adapting War of the Worlds already to be done in the dark. So we didn't really have to shift the script very much. It was already really engaging with people's imaginations, hoping to paint the picture so that you would feel like the Martians are there in the room with you, even though you can't see any kind of makeup or special effects. The special effects all kind of happen in your brain.
It's really, really cool. It sounds amazing. What aspects of the sound design would you say changed when you're considering doing this in the live theater setting to now the virtual setting? Because I was listening to the trailer that Zach's, I mean, it sounds a super immersive experience, definitely. So I'm curious at how the sound design aspects would be different, if at all.
I think that the biggest difference in the sound design aspects, and this is kind of an esoteric answer, but you kind of move a little bit more into the cinematic from the theatrical. I think that the show really has the chance to blend those two worlds together in a way that theater can't and movies can't. Whereas, you know, the like main kind of pillars of the cinematic style to me would be montage. And that's usually told kind of through a visual sensation, but we have the chance to do montage through audio that we might not have been able to do quite the same when the show was intended to be produced live. But we also still have this really cool theatrical element that actually I think the movie that does it best is Angels in America, as it is based on a theatrical play. But we have this idea that there's only 4 actors performing per night, and all 4 of those actors are playing about 60 different characters. So we have to work pretty hard on the specifics of the voice work to make sure that you know when it's the main character, the protagonist, who is named after H.G. Wells, speaking, versus when you're running through the city of Chicago with H.G. Wells' wife, Isabel, and some character in the background who's an old man is like, watch out for my wife, look out for her legs. So it's a lot of that interesting kind of voice work. One of my favorite things to watch is to like go online and watch interviews with like Harry Shearer or like Hank Azaria, where they do like 25 different voices and you recognize every single one of them. And you go, I can't believe that's the same actor performing all of those.
Yeah, man. So on why you picked War of the Worlds, what inspired you to pick this, and do you see it as topical, or did you just want to adapt maybe the classic radio drama? What kind of made you pick that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, especially because we picked that show and began our work on it in December, when we didn't know that it was going to be a radio drama, which obviously makes it a little bit more relevant to War of the Worlds. We didn't know that we were going to be telling the story of a Martian invasion, which ends up railroaded by essentially microbes and biology.
Oh,
and
you spoiled it. You spoiled it.
I know. I know. In writing it, we're like, how many people know what happens at the end of this? And we're like, not everyone, but like quite a few people. We won't focus on the mechanics of the twist of the end so much as we focus on the mechanics of the human twist of what happens to the people that are going through the Martian invasion / pandemic. But yeah, it was really interesting as we were writing it. And then when kind of March and April hit and we were like, wow, this is turning out to be really relevant. Do we lean in and get more on the nose with the parallels to, quarantine being one of them? One of the main things that happens in the story of War of the Worlds is the protagonist ends up trapped in a bunker with someone that he doesn't necessarily get along with so well. So we're like, wow, that's an incredible parallel. And then, as mentioned before, the ending, which has so much to do with biology, disease, and sort of infection, that was a huge parallel. So we had to ask ourselves the question if we wanted to have a light touch or a heavy touch. If we wanted to say to people, like, it's set in 2021 for one thing. So if we wanted to be like pandemic pricing at the bar as like one of the things that was the closest we came to, we ended up going with the light touch because we were like, people don't really want to hear about the quarantine that they're living in. We'll let them draw the parallels themselves. We'll do a couple of cute kind of nods in the sides, and we'll let the sort of media presence in the play have some political commentary to it. But for the most part, we leave it to the audience to do that work.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's asking too much of the audience to draw those parallels. I was actually really surprised to hear that you had picked it before the pandemic even started, because it seems so spot on for the moment.
And it gave us the chance to have a good, fully developed adaptation without rushing through it, because we'd already done most of the adapting by the time the pandemic even started. So now we're kind of just doing these little polishes. Whereas, if we were to have started doing the adaptation in April or May and started to plan for a show, I think we would have either had to rush it into production or it wouldn't be ready for another 4 months or so.
Right. So can you talk a little bit more about that adaptation? Like, did you take kind of the bones of the story and make it completely your own? Or did you just, how much did you take from the original and what did you turn it into?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the original story is by H.G. Wells, and it's a novel from the turn of the century, from around 1898. Then Orson Welles adapted it for the radio in the late 1930s, and that's kind of what it's more well known for. We sort of went back to the source material of the novel for the story more so than the radio show. The kind of plot in the novel is a science journalist is the protagonist. It is H.G. Wells. He never names basically any of the characters. They're all just called kind of keywords, like the curate, the artilleryman. He is a science journalist. He talks about his wife. She doesn't have a name. They kind of go through the beginning aspects of the story with H.G. Wells looking through a telescope, seeing some stuff is happening on Mars. Eventually, they crash land on Earth. He's one of the first people who's there at the pit to see the cylinder as it opens up and the aliens emerge. He, in a panic, takes his wife to their cousins, drops her off there, goes back to his home, ends up trapped in a bunker with a psychotic neighbor. And then he goes on this digression where he talks about his brother's experience in the city in London. He's out in the suburbs. He talks about the experience in London for a little while, and then we kind of come back to him after the Martians have taken over Earth, and he moves through and resolves the story. What we wanted to stick with was that general plot. We use a lot of quotations from the book. We have some nods to the radio show as well. But we updated it so that it's set in Chicago in 2021. It's a contemporary setting. It is the world that we live in right now, maybe let's say like a year from now, really, where, people aren't in quarantine in the world of our play, but you could easily believe that maybe they were before, even though they don't talk about it.
Right.
And then we really wanted to flesh out what would happen in the city. So we still kept them in the suburbs. We wanted to look a lot more at the human lives in the story and how they're affected by the Martian invasion. So, for instance, in the book, when H.G. Wells drops his wife off at the cousins, that's it. That's all they tell you. We wanted to know what that conversation would look like. In the middle of an alien invasion, to take your wife someplace else and leave her there and go back to the heart of the alien invasion, what would that conversation be? What would that relationship be in order for something like that to happen and have high stakes? And then we also wanted to dig more into the city. So what we've kind of done in our adaptation is had H.G. Wells take his wife to the city to go and visit her sister and make sure that her sister is safe during this Martian invasion. For one reason or another that I won't let you know right now, he has to go back to the suburbs. They end up separated. But we wanted Isabel Wells to be a main character in this piece too. So we kind of have this like parallel that happens where you jump between H.G. Wells stuck in his quarantine in his bunker with this psychotic neighbor, and then to go back to the city and have these sort of more action-oriented sequences where Isabel Wells and her sister Shelley kind of try to figure out what to do as they move through the city and move towards Lake Michigan to try and escape this Martian invasion.
Awesome. So a lot of what people who attend the show are going to get out of it is from the sounds and the sound effects. So can you talk a little bit more about where the sounds are coming from and how they're going to be integrated into the show? I guess as far as effects, as far as the score. And I remember from 3 Stories Up, you had a really great playlist that you used for the interstitials and during some moments in the play itself. So yeah, so how is all of this coming together and how is that practically all going to be implemented?
Great questions. So Ben and Ross are working already. Most of the score, I think, is actually written and we have it already, a month before we're going into production. So that puts us way ahead. The score is sort of based on a mood map, I'll call it, that I kind of put together as we were writing the script. So I had a whole bunch of music that I really liked that already existed that was copyrighted. Bands like Snow Palms. I don't know if you know that band, but I kind of took all that and said like, well, this is what I think the mood underlying the dialogue would be, so that it either plays with it or plays against it, or you can get a feel for that. And I gave that all as we decided that we would do an original score to Ben, and he's really taken off from that. So it doesn't sound at all like any of those songs that I put forward, but it really helped us to have the conversation of what the music should be doing and achieving. So he's used a lot of synthesizer. It's a lot of kind of that almost 1970s space sound, sort of Solaris, like Tarkovsky.
Awesome.
Tarkovsky? Andrei Tarkovsky. Is that his name?
Yeah.
I think that's his name. His sort of Solaris score, that kind of like spacey, understated, atmospheric kind of music. And then right now we're going through what all the different sound effects are. Some of those sound effects are going to be field recordings that Ross is doing. And some of them will be live Foley that happens in our booths. So as much as we can, we like to use that live Foley. If someone is like writing in a notebook, then I would have a notebook in here and I would write into it in my microphone as maybe another character is talking about writing, so that they can focus on their dialogue and I'd be in here doing those Foley effects. When we did 3 Stories Up, there was, someone had to open up a suitcase. So I had a suitcase in my lap and I would undo the snaps. There was some vacuum that happened. So we had some vacuum cleaners running in the background. And that's all part of the rehearsal process too, to make sure that the levels and the balance of those sounds good. It tells the story. You can tell what it is, so that you really get as much of a sumptuous treat out of the show as possible.
So what kind of, oh, go ahead, Tom.
Do you also act as director in this sense? Because it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts going on, and it's probably difficult to definitely coordinate and keep everything together for a certain vision that you collectively have.
So Corey Bradbury is the director. He's my co-artistic director, and we adapted the script together. So he is the director and the stage manager. So he'll run the QLab file. QLab is a file that stage managers use that allows you to essentially break down a sound cue into a nest. So what you can do in that sense is the timing for the dialogue doesn't have to be exactly the same every time through, because for instance, the intro, he hits go on QLab, and the intro of the music of the soundscape underneath will play indefinitely for as long as it needs to play. It'll probably be like a 20-minute file, even though it might only play for 14 seconds. And then when you want to come in with like the next layer, which you could call like a verse, he'd hit go again. And when it catches up to the beat, it will be introduced. So essentially the next part of the song will start up as soon as it can in a proper way. Yeah, QLab is actually an amazing program in the sense that it saves you having to be like, okay, this dialogue needs to last 23 seconds because then that chime is going to come in and we have to hear that chime. No, you can just call the chime as a layer on top of in this nest of this music.
Wow, very cool.
Awesome. So yeah, that makes coordinating this whole thing across so many different computers and so many different insulated closets kind of possible then.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all are plugged in with Ethernet. I haven't gotten my Ethernet yet, but so we make sure that our online stuff is great. So it all filters to Corey's computer. And then from Corey's computer, it goes out to the audience and they all hear the same thing. So if your Zoom kind of glitches a little bit, you might hear some glitches, but the idea is we will have very minimal glitches on our side of things.
It's amazing.
Got it. Yeah, that's really cool. So like trying to avoid a scenario where someone's Zoom kind of screws up and that sets a hiccup on the whole thing then.
Yeah, but that also is part of the live component of the show. Like you can't just go to Spotify and download A War of the Worlds. You'd have to tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern to do the show because we do it live every night. And of course, when you're doing things live, sometimes things go wrong. Mm-hmm. So for instance, in 3 Stories Up, during one show, the internet in Corey's neighborhood went out. Oof. And he was running the QLab. So there was like an underscore happening, and Bethany, the other actor, and I were doing a scene, and suddenly the underscore just went plip. Damn. And it was gone.
Oh, crazy.
She was in the middle of her line, and I was like, as a producer, it's my job to decide what happens next. So I was like, waited for her to finish, and then I just said, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 5-minute break as we've experienced some technical difficulties. We'll be playing a little music. Feel free to run to the washroom. We'll let you know as soon as we're back. And then I took my phone out, opened Spotify, got onto that playlist that you were talking about before, and just like shaking hand, like clicked play and held it up to my computer because none of the sound was coming through my computer. I wasn't a host on the Zoom. So I was like, what do I do? But that's what makes live theater so exciting. And what we're trying to kind of replicate with this is that feeling of community, that feeling of the performance being ephemeral, and that idea that everyone who's watching and everyone who's performing is all in the same space at the same time, which is what's important to us about theater.
Yeah. You're trying to create like an event, and that's something that's been so rare for everyone for the past 6 months. That's awesome. So what sounds, just out of curiosity, are you sending Ross to find?
Yeah, what type of direction are you giving him with that? That was something else I was thinking of too.
I just like picturing him crawling under a car or something to get a motor. I don't know.
I'm gonna open the Google Drive here that has the actual sound plot in it, because then I can tell you exactly what sounds he has to go and find. Ross was awesome because he had seen 3 Stories Up when we did it in May. And as we were gearing up for this production, he wrote me and he's like, yo, man, I want to be a part of this. I want to take part, help you any way I can. I just want to get behind the scenes and see how the sausage is made. And I was like, absolutely.
How the links are linked.
Getting really into that Chicago thing.
So I've got my sound plot in front of me right now to see all the sounds that Ross has to source.
Okay.
We've got radio affectation, radio interruption sound, Izzy's phone ringing, HG opening the door, HG's bicycle approaching, getting closer and coming to a stop.
Okay, that's a bit more challenging for him.
Yeah, digging that intensifies and then is interrupted. environmental. So like another aspect of our show is we have a lot of secondary sources. So there's news media, and it might be like an Alex Jones type bit. It might be like a CNN type bit. It might be a radio program that's playing in the background. So we want to make sure that all those sound effects are treated so that they sound like what that sounds like in real life. If you're watching TV in the background, that can't sound the same as me being a TV voice here right now on my microphone.
Right.
To kind of be in the background and sort of sound, you know what I mean? I'm trying to just like fake that. But Ross's job is sort of to make sure that those sounds actually kind of occur in a way that works. So there's a scene in a pub. So part of that is going to be indistinct voices in the background, keys on the table, glasses clinking, a lot of kind of atmospheric soundscaping that we're going to work on with Ross.
Cool.
There's also a big car accident scene, so there'll be a lot of sound design in that too.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, out of all of these, which do you think will be the toughest for Ross to get? But I think you might have just answered that with the car accident scene.
Well, the car accident is one. So one of the cool things about doing a show with no visual element is you get to do special effects through sound. So one of the fun things in writing the script was going like, okay, what is cool, amazing, practical effect scenery that we can make happen in this? So we have a car accident. That'll be fun. We have a sequence where there's a Martian attack on the Chicago River while our main characters are in the Chicago River trying to escape the Martian attack, and basically doing that by plunging underwater and holding their breath while the Martian is like shooting everyone. So you'll hear a lot of that action sequence from below underwater, muffled.
Oh, cool. So you're going to make it like fuzzy
run out of
somehow?
breath, when they run out of breath, they're back on the surface and everything is intense, and then back under.
Wow.
That sounds like a really fun to put together.
Yeah, it's a pretty good time.
Awesome. So yeah, on the trailer, I noticed that some of the voices have effects directly applied to them. Are those going to be taken care of beforehand and then record and then like press play on, or are you going to put them on voices somehow as it's going on?
The idea is as much as possible for it to be live. So we have some software that we are sourcing right now that as I'm like running the show as an actor, I can kind of go in, open up this other thing, even though Zoom is still open, click a button that'll treat my voice so it sounds like I'm speaking through a megaphone, come back over to the Zoom window, unmute myself on there, and then speak through the software effect as though I'm a police officer talking through a megaphone directing people in the city of Chicago. Then I've got to quickly go back and turn that effect off so that I can play the main character of HG, who is like in a bunker someplace in the middle of the suburbs, like within, 15 seconds.
Damn, yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it sounds intense.
Yeah, it's an organizational, it's a perfectionist's dream job, I think.
So, I mean, I know they're not exactly comparable, but would you say that putting a live production in the dark or putting a Zoom production with all these effects is more of a challenge for the people trying to do it?
I think it depends on who you are in the production. As an actor,
Got it.
You don't have to memorize lines as much. You still, there's parts where I might be over in a different file and I'm doing Foley and I can't have my tablet in my hand. But for the most part in the show, I'll have this in my hand with the script on it and I'll be reading from the script. So I don't have to do any memorization. So that is an actor's dream job come true. For the front of house team, there is some different challenges, especially for a show in the dark. There was a lot of challenges for us as a front of house team there, in the sense that you would have to blindfold the audience, then they put their hands on each other's shoulders, then you guide them to their seats in the light. Then I was the bartender, even though I was also an actor, because we always try to run a bit of a skeleton crew. So I would bring them out these gimlets that we had made and sold at the concession in the lobby, put them into their hands, take their tickets. Once all the drinks were handed out, once everyone was in the theater, we would go to our places, we'd turn the lights off, and then we would do a a house speech that said, okay, you're now welcome to take your blindfold off. They take their blindfolds off and they be in the pitch black. And like, no one believes it when you say like the show happens in the pitch black. People are like, there's like candlelight. But no, it is pitch
Wow.
black. Your eyes don't adjust. We light lock the room. So doing it over Zoom, I think can be a little bit easier because you don't have to deal quite so much with people's personalities in that way. But you have to make sure that everyone can get onto the Zoom. You have to make sure that everyone understands that it's a show with no visual components. The amount of people who tune in and they're like, what am I supposed to look at? And
Yeah,
we're
I
like,
think their Zoom is screwing up or something.
yeah. And we're like, you're supposed to look at nothing. In fact, it's ideal to like dim the brightness on your computer down to black so that then you can actually turn your visual stimulus off and come with us on the adventure in your imagination.
So when you were doing theater in the dark, when people were leaving, were the front of their shirts covered in gimlet?
No, but I did definitely like hear a few people spill it when they would put it on the ground next to their chairs. And I, as a performer, would be like, oh no, there's a gimlet on the ground and it's kind of near one of my paths.
Oh,
Here we
shit.
go. Because I can't see either, right? Like that's kind of the fun of it is like the way we did it without revealing too much of the magic is there were tangible things for Bethany and I to hold on to / touch as landmarks so that we would know where we were.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those things were like on the floor and we like carpets on the floor. But if you found yourself off the carpet and on the hardwood, you were lost. You were like, I don't know where I am. I have to wait until she says something so I can kind of get like, because you could get vertigo in there so easily. I need to wait for her to speak so I can kind of orient myself with at least like which way is forward and which way is back. And then just hope that I hit carpet before I hit audience member as I start moving forward.
So kind of going off what you were saying before and how people who tune in should experience this. What would the room setup and libation setup be ideally for someone listening to A War of the Worlds?
Yeah, what's the perfect listening experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it'd be different for different people. Something that struck me the other day that I was like, oh, this is how I would listen to it, is when I was in high school, one of my favorite things to do would be when I were to go to bed at night, turn off my bedside lamp, and I would put on my Discman, and I would put on a full album, and I would listen to it, and I would pretend that I was in the audience or I was in the band, and I would really just give my full attention to the entirety of the album. And that was like one of my favorite things to do. I think the show would be perfect listened to in that way. Like plug in your headphones, get the show running, turn off all the lights, close your eyes, and disappear into the story. The other way that I think would be really cool is with a group of people to do a listening party for it. So to get a group of 6 of your friends together, set up your living room so everyone's got a nice comfortable seat to kind of recline in, fix yourself a tequila old fashioned. That's going to be the recipe for the show. That drink occurs in the show like the Gimlet in 3 Stories Up did. And turn the lights down to nothing, maybe turn on the fireplace so you could have that little crackle if you want a little bit of light, and sit back and listen with your friends. There's an intermission so you can refresh your drink, go to the bathroom, kind of go, oh, this is a cool experience.
Yeah.
And then turn the lights back off and go back into the world of Kankakee, Illinois, and Chicago.
Yeah, I love the emphasis on the authentic experience. It's really cool and really unique. You're doing something really fascinating.
Yeah, it's something different to do when we're all stuck inside doing the same thing over and over. I know people get Zoom fatigue, but I think an important thing to remember is you don't even have to look at your computer screen. If you got a nice speaker setup too, it's all in stereo. So if you've got like 5.1, I think it would be a pretty transportative experience. Transportive?
Yeah, like I even said, the trailer, it's definitely in stereo, listening to the trailer. It's very immersive. So the way it's set up, there's sounds coming at you in different directions, voices coming at you in different directions is very well done. So kudos. And this sounds like it's going to be an amazing production.
Yeah, so this also kind of expands your potential audience a little bit. Like I wouldn't really, well, more than a little bit, I wouldn't be able to see you perform normally because I mean, I'm in New York. After live theater can be a thing again, do you think this is something that you're still going to be interested in doing, in putting together these putting together these Zoom shows that folks can call in from wherever, or are you going to transition back to kind of the type of thing you were doing before all of this happened?
I think we're going to come up with a pretty cool stepwise production plan for our shows going forward. So like with 3 Stories Up, we did it live first, which meant that when we did it virtually, we essentially didn't need any rehearsal. We didn't need to rememorize the lines. I think we had 2 or 3 rehearsals leading into doing that show almost a year after we'd done the original production, just to kind of brush up what we were doing, make sure the sound levels were good, and get the Foley stuff down for our little studios. So I think probably going forward, we would do a show live first, and then we would probably about 6 months later do it over the virtual hosting, especially as we start to gather more listeners, followers, fans who like our work. We want to make sure that we're always engaging with our international audience, because what a cool experience as a, you know, more local, smaller indie theater company to have an international following.
Yeah, that's pretty damn cool.
Totally. So I've been mentioning this trailer and I want to share it with everyone. Mack, why don't you set it up for us and then we'll play it so everyone can get a little taste of what they'll experience if they tune in, as Zach said.
Absolutely. So the trailer features the music of Ben Zucker, which will kind of guide us into the world as you disappear from your living room where you're listening and join us in space. There's a number of voices. You have almost all of our performers who are coming at you from Vancouver, Chicago, and New Orleans. And they sort of give you a montage, collage-esque experience of what the show will be like.
Cool. All right, here it is, the trailer of War of the Worlds.
No one would have believed,
You see this? What's happening in the suburbs?
in the first years of the 21st century,
Wi-Fi's not working.
that this world was being watched keenly and closely
What's happening?
by intelligences greater than our own.
That's in Kankakee. We should drive out and see it.
Careful. Don't get too close.
Dr. Pearson, have there been fresh attempts to signal these beings?
This October,
It's something more than a meteorite.
Theater in the Dark presents
It's a cylinder.
And it's opening.
A War of the Worlds. A virtual audio drama performed live every night over Zoom. Pay what you can tickets available now at theaterinthedark.com.
Wow, that trailer was incredible, Mack. Thank you for sharing it with us. So tell us where people can find out more about Theater in the Dark and this run of shows for War of the Worlds.
Sure. So you can go to theaterinthedark.com, has all the information on it. If you want to become a sponsor, you can go through that. If you want to buy tickets, which will get a link sent to you so that you can tune into the show from anywhere in the world, you can do that at theaterinthedark.com/tickets or find it on the main page. If you want to listen to the trailer again or see any of our other trailers that are online, that's all on the website too. The show itself is pay what you can. So we want to make sure that there's access for everybody in the world to watch it, whether you have money or not. It runs from October 15th until November 21st. It'll play at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Pacific, and then all the other international times too. I think that's pretty much everything.
All right. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, Mac, we
Great.
can't wait. This was really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to being a part of Theater in the Dark's run of shows of War of the Worlds. I'll definitely be tuning in.
Great. Thanks for having me.